Hold on just a damn second, because Jon Moxley, the deathmatch king, the unhinged lunatic, the man who literally chose to leave WWE and go to AEW because he was tired of the corporate machine and wanted complete creative freedom, just showed up on WWE Raw out of nowhere and cut one of the most brutal and disrespectful promos I've ever heard, calling Bron Breakker just a weak kid and threatening to end his rise before it even really begins. And if you're not shaking with confusion about how Jon Moxley is even on Raw when he's been AEW's top guy for years, furious about the audacity of calling Bron Breakker a 26-year-old genetic freak who looks like he was created in a laboratory specifically to be a wrestling superstar, a weak kid, and terrified about what this means for both companies and both wrestlers' futures, then you missed the most shocking wrestling development in years that's going to completely reshape the landscape of professional wrestling and create a dream match that nobody thought was even possible, but that everyone's been secretly wanting to see ever since Bron debuted and people started comparing him to the intensity and violence that Jon Moxley brings to everything he does. Let me break down exactly what happened on Raw, because every single detail of this segment is loaded with implications that go way beyond just one promo. According to reports and what viewers witnessed with their own shocked eyes, Raw was proceeding as normal. Maybe Bron Breakker was cutting a promo about his dominance, maybe he was in a match asserting his physical superiority, maybe he was doing a backstage segment with the Vision, when suddenly the lights changed, an unfamiliar music hit, and Jon Moxley walked out onto the Raw stage like he owned the place. The crowd had to be absolutely losing their minds, because Jon Moxley hasn't been on WWE television in over 5 years. He left in 2019 specifically because he was creatively frustrated and wanted to do things his way. He became the face of AEW, their world champion multiple times, their most reliable main event star. So seeing Jon Moxley on Raw shouldn't even be possible based on everything we know about his contract situation and his relationship with WWE. Unless, and this is where it gets insane, Moxley's AEW contract expired, or he negotiated an early release, or WWE paid a massive amount of money to get him for this appearance, or there's some kind of cross-promotional agreement happening that nobody saw coming. Any of these explanations would be huge news on their own, but they're almost secondary to what Moxley actually did once he appeared. Because Moxley didn't come out for a nostalgia pop or to shake hands or to congratulate anyone. He came out with purpose, and that purpose was to call out Bron Breakker specifically. Moxley got on the microphone, and you know his promo wasn't scripted word for word the way WWE usually operates. Moxley's never worked that way and probably made it a condition of his appearance that he could speak freely, and he eviscerated Bron with words that cut deeper than any physical attack could. "You're still just a weak kid." Those words are absolutely devastating when you think about what they mean and who's saying them. Jon Moxley is calling Bron Breakker, this physical specimen who's been positioned as the future of WWE, someone who's dominated everyone put in front of him, a member of the legendary Steiner family with wrestling in his DNA. Moxley is calling him weak. Not just weak, but still weak, implying that Bron hasn't grown or evolved, that all his physical advantages and all his family legacy don't matter, because fundamentally he lacks something essential that separates real dangerous wrestlers from people who just look dangerous. And calling him a kid is equally disrespectful, because it dismisses everything Bron has accomplished by reducing him to someone who's just starting out, someone who hasn't earned his spot, someone who's playing at being a tough guy but hasn't actually been tested in the ways that matter. Moxley's essentially saying that Bron's WWE success is meaningless because WWE protects its stars and doesn't let them face real adversity the way somewhere like AEW or the independent scene would. The threat to end Bron's rise is where this goes from disrespectful promo to actual conflict that needs to be resolved in the ring. Moxley isn't just talking trash, he's declaring his intention to stop Bron Breakker's momentum, to expose him as the weak kid that Moxley claims he is, to prove that all the hype around Bron is just WWE's promotional machine rather than genuine toughness and ability. That's a challenge that Bron can't ignore without looking weak, which means we're building toward a match between these two, and that match has implications that go way beyond just one contest. Let's talk about why Jon Moxley would even want to come to WWE and call out Bron Breakker specifically, because the motivation matters for understanding where this story goes. Theory 1: Moxley genuinely believes that WWE's new generation of stars aren't as tough or as tested as the wrestlers grinding in AEW and on the independents, and he wants to prove that point by taking on WWE's golden boy Bron Breakker. This would be Moxley operating out of pure competitive fire and a desire to show that his philosophy of wrestling, violent, uncompromising, real, produces tougher wrestlers than WWE's more controlled environment. If this is the motivation, then Moxley vs. Bron becomes about philosophies as much as about two individuals. It's WWE style versus independent/AEW style, it's protected star versus battle-tested veteran, it's potential versus proven. That's compelling storytelling that gives the match meaning beyond just two guys fighting. Theory 2: Moxley is working with WWE on a special appearance deal specifically to help elevate Bron Breakker by giving him a credible outside threat to overcome. This would mean the promo, despite being harsh, is actually designed to make Bron look better by association. If Bron can beat or at least hang with Jon Moxley, someone with Moxley's reputation and credibility, then Bron's stock rises enormously. WWE has done this before, bringing in outside talent specifically to put over their homegrown stars in high-profile matches. If this is the case, then Moxley calling Bron weak is reverse psychology storytelling, making the eventual victory over Moxley more impressive by starting from a place where Bron is being dismissed and disrespected. The journey from weak kid to warrior who defeated Jon Moxley is a classic underdog arc, even though Bron doesn't really fit the underdog profile physically. Theory 3, there's personal history between Moxley and someone in Bron's circle, maybe Bron's father Rick Steiner or Uncle Scott Steiner, maybe someone in the Vision faction, and Moxley is using Bron as a proxy for settling old scores. Wrestling is full of multi-generational feuds and connections that span decades. If Moxley has beef with the Steiner family that we don't know about, attacking the youngest Steiner makes sense as a way to draw them out and settle things. This would add layers to the conflict beyond just Moxley versus Bron. It would involve family honor, legacy, and proving that the next generation can stand up for their family name against someone attacking it. That's powerful storytelling if WWE explores it properly. Theory 4, this is part of a larger invasion angle where AEW and WWE are doing some kind of crossover programming, possibly building toward a super show where wrestlers from both companies face off. Moxley attacking WWE's rising star could be the first shot in a larger war between promotions, with other AEW wrestlers potentially showing up to challenge WWE stars and vice versa. This would be unprecedented in modern wrestling and would completely change the industry landscape. WWE and AEW working together on any level seemed impossible just a few months ago given the competitive tension between them. But if contracts are expiring, if business realities are forcing collaboration, if there's money to be made that benefits both companies, then anything's possible. Bron Breakker's response to being called a weak kid is absolutely crucial for his character going forward. If Bron responds with fear or uncertainty, if he seems intimidated by Moxley's reputation, then Moxley's words carry more weight and Bron looks diminished. But if Bron fires back with equal intensity, if he challenges Moxley to prove his words in the ring, if Bron shows that he's not intimidated by anyone regardless of their reputation, then Bron comes out of this exchange looking stronger even before any physical confrontation happens. The ideal response from Bron would be something like, "You call me a weak kid? You don't know anything about me. You've been in AEW fighting in front of 1,000 people while I've been here in WWE proving myself on the biggest stage in wrestling. You want to test me? You want to see if I'm weak? Step in the ring with me and I'll show you what the future looks like beating up the past." That kind of response shows confidence without disrespecting what Moxley's accomplished, accepts the challenge without backing down, and frames the conflict as generational rather than personal. But if Bron responds with typical WWE scripted promo-style over-rehearsed lines that don't match the intensity of what Moxley brought, then the promo battle is already lost before the physical battle begins. Moxley's strength has always been his authenticity, his ability to make everything feel real rather than staged. Bron needs to match that authenticity or risk looking like a kid playing wrestler facing a real wrestler. The match between Moxley and Bron Breakker, when it inevitably happens, is going to be fascinating from a style perspective. Moxley works a violent, hard-hitting, chaotic style that involves a lot of brawling, weapons when allowed, and an unpredictable pace that keeps opponents off balance. He's comfortable with blood and brutality. He thrives in environments where things can get nasty. That's his element. Bron works a power-based style with impressive agility for his size, lots of suplexes, lots of explosive strength spots, lots of showing off his freakish athleticism. Bron in WWE has been protected from the really violent hardcore style that Moxley specializes in. Bron's matches have been hard-hitting but they've been safe compared to the stuff Moxley regularly does in AEW where blood and brutality are more normalized. So the question becomes, what rules govern their match? If it's a standard WWE match with WWE's restrictions on violence, that favors Bron because he's working in his comfort zone while Moxley is restricted from doing his most effective stuff. But if WWE allows a more violent, less restricted match, maybe making it a street fight or no DQ or some other stipulation that lets Moxley work his style, then Bron is being thrown into deep water where he's less experienced. The match stipulation could determine who has the advantage before the bell even rings. The broader implications for WWE and AEW if this is real and not just a fever dream I'm having are staggering. If Jon Moxley can appear on WWE Raw, what does that mean for other AEW wrestlers whose contracts might be expiring? Could we see Kenny Omega show up in WWE? Could Bryan Danielson come back? Could WWE stars appear on AEW programming? The potential for dream matches and crossover storylines is endless if the walls between companies are coming down. But there's also danger in too much crossover because both companies have built distinct identities and distinct fan bases. WWE is the corporate giant with mainstream reach. AEW is the alternative for fans who want something different from WWE's product. If the lines blur too much, both companies risk losing what makes them special. Fans who watch both companies do so because they offer different experiences. If everything becomes one big shared universe, does that make wrestling better or does it homogenize everything into one bland product? The wrestling media is going to be absolutely insane covering this story because Jon Moxley on WWE Raw is the kind of thing that generates millions of clicks and hours of discussion. Every podcast, every YouTube channel, every wrestling news site is going to be analyzing every word of Moxley's promo, every implication of his appearance, every possibility for where this goes. That's great for business and for keeping wrestling in the public conversation, but it also means there's pressure on WWE and Moxley to deliver on the promise of this confrontation with an actual match and storyline that lives up to the hype. Bron Breakker's career could legitimately be defined by how this situation resolves. If Bron beats Moxley in a competitive match where both men look good, Bron's stock goes through the roof because he'll have beaten one of the most respected wrestlers in the world, someone whose approval means something across all wrestling promotions. If Bron loses to Moxley, it needs to be in a way that protects Bron. Maybe Moxley uses tactics that Bron isn't familiar with, maybe there's interference, maybe Bron shows moral victory and defeat by proving he's tougher than Moxley claimed even if he doesn't get the win. What WWE cannot do is have Bron lose clean in a way that suggests Moxley was right about him being weak. That would devastate Bron's character and waste years of building him as the next big thing. Even if the plan is for Moxley to win to set up a rematch or a longer program, the first match needs to establish that Bron can hang with Moxley even if he ultimately falls short. Jon Moxley's legacy is also affected by this appearance and whatever follows. Moxley left WWE as a disgruntled mid-carder who felt creatively stifled. He became a star in AEW, proving that he could be a main event talent when given the freedom to be himself. Coming back to WWE, even for a special appearance, raises questions about whether Moxley is admitting WWE was right all along, whether he's prioritizing money over principles, whether his AEW run was just a stepping stone back to the big leagues. Moxley needs to make it clear through his words and actions that he's appearing on his own terms, that this isn't a surrender to WWE but a challenge to them on his terms. He needs to maintain his authenticity and his edge even while working within WWE's system. If Moxley becomes just another WWE character reading scripted promos and working safe matches, then what was the point of his AEW journey? But if Moxley can bring his AEW energy and freedom to WWE even temporarily, that could influence how WWE presents their own talent going forward. The violence level that WWE allows in a Moxley vs. Bron match will tell us a lot about how much WWE is willing to adapt to accommodate different styles. WWE has been relatively tame with blood and hardcore elements compared to AEW's willingness to go extreme. If WWE lets Moxley work the kind of violent match he's known for, that's a huge concession to his style and suggests WWE is willing to evolve. If WWE restricts Moxley to their usual style, that limits the match's potential and might frustrate fans who want to see what Moxley can really do against a WWE star when all restrictions are lifted. So here's what I need from every single person watching this video, because Jon Moxley calling out Bron Breakker on Raw is one of the most shocking developments in modern wrestling, and I'm desperate to know how everyone is processing this. How is Jon Moxley even on Raw when he's supposed to be under AEW contract? Do you think Moxley's right about Bron being a weak kid, or is that just mind games? Who do you want to win when they inevitably face off, the proven AEW veteran or the WWE rising star? What kind of match stipulation would favor each wrestler? Is this the beginning of real WWE/AEW crossover, or just a one-time special appearance? Should Bron feel insulted or honored that someone of Moxley's caliber is calling him out? And honestly, can you even believe this is happening, or does it still feel surreal? Drop your shocked reactions in the comments, because I need to know I'm not hallucinating this entire situation. Hit that like button if you're as confused and excited as I am about Jon Moxley being on WWE Raw. Subscribe to WrestlingNewsCC because we're going to be covering every single development in this story as it unfolds and trying to make sense of what this means for both companies and both wrestlers. Share this with every wrestling fan you know, because this is huge and everyone needs to be talking about Jon Moxley vs. Bron Breakker and what it represents for the future of wrestling. Jon Moxley exploding back onto Raw and calling Bron Breakker a weak kid is either the beginning of the most exciting crossover angle wrestling has seen in decades, or it's going to be a huge disappointment if WWE doesn't follow through properly. The potential is absolutely massive. Dream match, cross-promotional intrigue, style clash, generational warfare, proving grounds for WWE's future. But the execution needs to be perfect. WWE can't waste this opportunity. They can't protect Bron so much that the match feels safe and boring. They can't restrict Moxley so much that he can't be himself. They need to let both men work at their highest level and deliver something special that justifies the shock of Moxley's appearance. The wrestling world is watching. Let's see if WWE delivers.